Welcome to the number one show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech. Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to the show. This is another crowdfunding episode, and it's with my good friend, Dr. Aadeel Akhtar. Aadeel is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Psyonic, a really interesting company. I've been following them actually for many years, and so I told Aadeel to come on the show. Psyonic is essentially redefining what it means to be human through bionic technologies, and their first product, which is called the Ability Hand, is an advanced bionic hand that is accessible for people with upper limb amputations. Now, what's interesting about this is that Aadeel and his team have just done such a phenomenal job with the PR around this. I feel like every other week I'm opening LinkedIn and seeing their bionic hand on 60 Minutes. Boston Dynamics took it and added it to one of their robots. And so they have a great job of using viral marketing and storytelling to get earned media. Now, on the flip side, though, what's interesting about this technology is that it's essentially giving people the high performance hand that they need, right? And they essentially designed this hand to be extremely tough. So they do all these crazy tests, dropping it off of like second story buildings. They've made it to be the fastest and believe that it's actually the first of its kind to offer true multi-touch sensitivity. It's also a great hand, or great hand. They can lend a hand, pun intended. You see what I did there? But it's essentially a great match for the robotics industry, which I learned through Aadeel is also having difficulty because they need to find ways to develop multi-touch, multi-purpose hands. And they're essentially selling to hands to leaders in the field, including Aptronic and Meta. Facebook Meta. Goldman Sachs estimates that market will grow to about $6 billion by 2035. The global market for prosthetics, on the other hand, orthotics, is approaching about $2.8 billion and has the potential to expand to a population of about 3.5 million people. Right. And just think about how many people in third world countries experience limb loss. And it could be an extremely devastating thing because, it renders your ability not only to take care of your family physically, but also to even work. Now, to date, Psyonic has raised about $1.6 million through their equity crowdfunding campaign. They've raised a lot more money through traditional venture, I believe, or at least being bootstrapped. But to date, they've raised about $1.6 million with 898 investors at a valuation of $49.9 million. The minimum to invest with them is $249, which is very affordable. And if you want to invest in them, you can invest in them by going straight to psyonic.io/invest. That's Psyonic spelled PSYONIC.io/invest. And again, the purpose of this episode is purely for education and entertainment purposes only. By no means are we making any kind of investment recommendations or anything like that. This is a podcast, my friends. Do your due diligence. I'm just a guy on the internet that likes to interview really cool people from great technology companies. And finally, if you're a CEO or founder who's currently raising money, whether it's through equity crowdfunding or traditional venture capital investing, or in any way, shape, or form, you're just trying to attract more investors, but you're having a hard time getting your narratives out there, positioning yourself, even designing a category. Well, here at the State of MedTech, we love working with startups and founders. And so if you're interested to get our help on the marketing side, go ahead and reach out to us. Either find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or wherever else you'd like to, or shoot me an email at hello@khateebandco.com. That's hello@khateebandco.com. And now let's get on to the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. And today we have another exciting company who's crowdfunding, one that I've actually been following and I've known the founder for I think a few years now, and that's Psyonic. And
their founder and CEO, Dr. Aadeel Akhtar. If you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, he's got the Bionic hand with him. And I'm pretty sure that many of you have seen this hand or Aadeel because they've done such a fantastic job storytelling to the market. And more importantly, they got great viral videos. I got to tell you, they have this thing like, feeding Aadeel chocolates, getting blown up. I think Boston Dynamics put the hands on their robots, on the dog robot. So it's been quite amazing to watch you guys do your thing. And of course, to date, you've raised about $1,549,814.10. With a valuation of $49.94 million, the minimum investment is $249. So for those who are listening, you don't have to be an accredited investor. You can go and invest in their crowdfund. That is correct, right?
Yep.
The deal that you don't have to be an accredited investor. So I'll put it in the show notes below, but you can go check out their Start Engine page in two places. One is just go to startengine.com and look them up, or just go to startengine.com/offering/Psyonic, spelled PSYONIC, or www.psyonic.io/invest. Is that not amazing that I remembered all that? That's what happens when you do this a lot. So, Aadeel, before we kind of jump into the company, the marketing, the investment, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about your story.
Yeah. And so building bionic limbs is actually something I wanted to do my entire life, ever since I was 7 years old. So I was born in the Chicago suburbs, but my parents are from Pakistan. And I was visiting Pakistan when I was 7. And that was the first time I met someone missing a limb. She was my age, with her right leg using a tree branch as a crutch. That's what inspired me to go into this field. And ever since then, the original plan was to become an MD, like many South Asian kids growing up in the States. And I went to Loyola in Chicago, got a bachelor's in biology there, then was pre-med. But I took my first computer science class, loved everything about coding, engineering. So ended up getting a master's in computer science there. Went down to the University of Illinois, got another master's in electrical and computer engineering, PhD in neuroscience, and then I left medical school to build the company because this was much more fun than finishing med school. So it's been quite a journey to get to this point.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So when you decide to go this route, I believe you were a PhD, I believe, correct?
Yep.
So then did you specifically go into your doctorate with a focus on robotics and bionics? Was that the plan all along?
Yep. That was the plan. And then originally, while I was doing my PhD, I was enrolled in the MD PhD program at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And the original plan was that I would work at an academic hospital somewhere where I'd see patients one day a week, and then the rest of the week I would have a lab in that university where we develop devices. And while I was doing my PhD, we got the chance to go down to Ecuador to work with a nonprofit organization called the Range of Motion Project. And their whole mission is to provide prosthetics to those who can't afford them in developing nations, because apparently 80% of people with limb differences are in developing nations, and less than 3% have access to affordable prosthetics. And this is part of a much longer story of 2 weeks of all-nighters trying to get this hand, an early prototype of our bionic ability hand to work. And our patient that we met there, his name was Juan Supillo, and he lost his left hand 35 years prior due to machine gun fire from a helicopter. Oh
my God.
And there was a border war between Ecuador and Peru. And he made a pinch with his left hand for the first time in 35 years with our bionic hand. And, the hand was 3 times the size of an average adult human hand. Wires go everywhere, plugged into breadboards, power supplies, the wall, you name it. And despite that, he said in front of these international news stations that he felt as though a part of him had come back. And that's when I realized that if I stay in academia, if I go the traditional route where I work in an academic hospital, that this just ends up as a journal paper. And if we want everyone to feel the exact same way that Juan did, we had to commercialize the technology. And that's when Psyonic was born.
That's amazing. And there's this idea of being a mission-based company is always thrown around. It's kind of like one of those buzzwords. But your company really is mission-based because, from the story that you had from the time that you were a kid in Pakistan to, the kind of impact you've had on patients. That's one thing I've really loved about Psyonic. And I think that's in part why you've done such a good job raising money. I mean, no offense, there to other medtech companies. There's a lot of medtech companies with amazing technologies, but they don't do a good job telling the story of the technology and the impact it's going to have on patients' lives. And of course, more importantly, the commercial impact too, because when people invest, I mean, we all like to, donate to things that make us feel good, but this is an investment that needs to have a return. So we'll get to that in a moment. But that's amazing. So, what simply put, how do you describe Psyonic in one sentence?
So we develop advanced bionic limbs that are accessible for both humans and robots.
And robots. Tell me a little bit, why robots? I remember we talked about this because you mentioned this is actually a really big problem, and this is, I think, in part why it's an interesting investment. Why robots?
Yeah. So when we first set out to build these hands, they were pretty much, this is an FDA registered medical device. It's covered by Medicare in the U.S., and so it's prescribed by physicians, right, to patients who are missing limbs. And what we found as well was that if you're building a robot to do human tasks, we've optimized our hand for humans to do human tasks. So it makes sense that the robots would use the same thing that the humans are using. And so we've had NASA has bought a hand, Facebook has bought a couple of hands from us. A lot of humanoid robot companies have bought hands from us too. And they're using it for things like, I guess NASA, they're putting it on their humanoid robot, humanoid astronaut robot that they want to send to space. And the idea is that you'd be here on Earth controlling it, and then you'd be able to feel things up on the International Space Station, or eventually the moon and Mars, while you're here on Earth, and then manipulate objects as well. So like a moon rock or something like that. And then the same way that a human would do that with a natural hand or a prosthetic hand as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think, but that being said, the what's the tip of the spear for you guys when you guys raise this money and go commercial? Is it specifically to go on the healthcare side and then worry about robotics later? What does that look like?
Yeah, honestly, the beauty of it is because it's the exact same hand that our patients are getting, that the robots are getting as well. Mm-hmm. We intend to do both of them simultaneously. And let's say that the robotics market, I mean, that's supposedly supposed to explode in the next couple of years. In particular, we've got a bunch of huge players on there, like Apptronic is building, they want to build tens of thousands of these fleets of humanoid robots for consumers, right? And you multiply that by 2, and that's how many hands you need. At the same time, that can help to subsidize the cost for patients who can't afford it in the U.S. and the world to use as a prosthetic hand as well. But the thing is that I can literally take this hand off and then put it on a robot, so I can just pop it off of this guy, put it on a robot, put it on one of our users, and it's the same code that runs on both of them.
That is amazing. So how long? When was Psyonic first established? Was this when you were a PhD student in a lab? I mean, walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was around 2015. So I was still in the middle of my PhD at the University of Illinois. So when we came back from Ecuador on that trip, right, when we were we need to commercialize this technology, we entered our school's business plan competition, and we ended up winning that in 2015 when we did a couple of programs that were sponsored by the National Science Foundation. So one of them was called iCore, where the whole idea is that you've got this cool engineering idea that came out of the university and you want to commercialize it. So you need to get out of the lab and start talking with as many potential customers as possible. So these were the clinicians that might purchase our hand and fit them on an amputee, or the amputees themselves. And we learned so much in that process that we would never have figured out if we just approached it from a straight engineering side. So for example, one of the things was that we thought the biggest issue was that these hands were too expensive, right? Which is a problem, but mm-hmm. What was even bigger of a problem was that someone's $50,000 bionic hand breaking because they accidentally hit it against the side of a table, right? Because they're made out of these rigid materials that would snap at the joints whenever you hit it. But our own fingers, right? Our own natural fingers, if you hit it, it's got some flexibility in it. And that's what makes it resilient to these impacts. And so we were like, how can we leverage the low cost of 3D printed manufacturing, but still make this hand more robust than anything else that's out there? Because if you give someone a 3D printed hand, they're going to break it within minutes of using it, right? And that's where we started looking to soft robotics. It was this up and coming field where instead of making these rigid materials and using rigid joints, you would use things that were more like your own natural human body, like silicone and rubber, like that were kind of like your skin and your ligaments and your muscles and things like that. And so on the hand, right, if for anyone who can see it, like these fingers are flexible. So I could take this and I can smash it and it survives that impact and the fingers just flex back to the original position that they were in and the hand is totally fine. And so we went with this and we started testing it on patients and it was working out really well for them as well. And so that's how we kind of like started to develop the latest generation of the ability hand that's now on the market.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What were some of the more difficult parts of engineering the hand? Because it is, I'm not an engineer myself, but what did strike me, because we've all seen like bionic hands, and usually they're kind of, it's one of two things, if not both. They're either very clunky and or not very aesthetically pleasing. And your hand, your bionic hand is actually like extremely functional. Because I've seen it do very, very fine motor movements, which is quite impressive. The chocolate in the mouth is like one example of it, but I've seen it do a lot of different things. Lighting a match. So like, at least for me, having come from the robotics world, like I can appreciate like the kind of engineering that it took. Because if you think about like striking a match takes a lot of fine motor movement, including the fact that you could break the match, right? So like seeing you do that with like a long stick match was pretty impressive. And again, for those who are watching, like just look up Psyonic on YouTube. You'll see all kinds of amazing videos. But what were some more difficult areas of designing and developing the hand?
Yeah, so a lot of it came down to like the materials that we used for the hand in particular, right? So I was mentioning like silicone and rubber and things like that on the kind of like the mechanical side, but also like finding the right motors to use in this. And so and we've got several patents on this technology as well. That the flexible finger design that allows me to like smash it with a hammer. Another one is our motor control technology that allows us to have the fastest bionic hand on the market, while still having grip strengths that are comparable to like humans for normal activities of daily living. And so we actually spent the summer of 2017. So it was me, my wife, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, our 1.5-year-old son, who's now 7 years old, and my current director of engineering, who was my undergraduate student. He just graduated at that point in time, as well as 3 of our engineers in a small high-rise in Shenzhen, China, for 2.5 months, and only one of us spoke Chinese.
Wow.
And that was like such a pivotal moment for the company for many reasons. So one was we were able to just really quickly, rapidly prototype when we were there, because it's the electronics capital of the world. All of our cell phones or computers are made in Shenzhen, right? So we were able to like get an electronic circuit board like basically the very next day, shipped directly to our house for like super cheap. And that's where we found our motors and our gear manufacturers in particular, using the motor technology that we've got in the hand. But on top of that, and this is one of the stories of like perseverance for like any startup, right? So we were using the earnings that we had won from our startup competition to basically fund us that summer in China, right? So
how much did you win that from that startup competition?
It was about $25,000.
Okay, which is not much. Like, you go through that pretty quickly.
Exactly, right? And I think that summer we only spent about like $12,000 of those dollars, and for that that apartment for like 7 people or like 6 people in China, right? Which is just absolutely nuts again, right? And so we had tried doing an Indiegogo campaign at that time, right, to try and raise funds for our company. And we were super early on, right? It was like super early prototypes of everything. We only had like 1 or 2 beta testers at that point in time as well. And so we wanted to raise, I think, $150,000. And we ended up raising $7,000, right? So it was like a complete and massive failure on our end, right? And then at the end of that year, I think we had about like $200 in our bank account, which was like, the lowest amount of money that we'd ever had, right, in our bank accounts, like since the inception of the company. And that summer, we had applied for our first Small Business Innovation and Research grant, SBIR grant from the National Science Foundation. And we found out that December that we actually were successful in getting that grant. And literally the next week in January, we had $200,200 in our bank. So it went from like, this low to the most money that we'd ever had to develop these bionic limbs. And so then I triggered a leave of absence from medical school at that point, and then the company has just been like growing like exponentially since then. And so it's just this like roller coaster ride of a startup that, I mean, I'm grateful to have such a supportive family and wife that has gone through this journey with me, and it just takes a lot of perseverance and tenacity to get through it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you guys are definitely in a much better place today. So to date, how much have you guys raised?
Yeah, so we did a pre-seed round through like angel investors and VCs about 2 years ago, and on that we raised 1.4 billion. And then we raised 2.4 million in grants from the National Science Foundation. And then with the start of the Start Engine crowdfunding campaign, that's been an additional 1.5 million. And it's just climbing up from there. And we just moved to San Diego. We're working with the military hospital, doing some crazy stuff with them that we can get into in a bit as well. And we're just starting to ramp up production. Our biggest problem is that we've got more demand than we can produce. So it's a good problem to have.
That is a great problem to have. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the project you're doing with the military.
Yeah, so traditionally the way that these hands are controlled and hooked up to someone is that you have something called a socket that's molded to your residual limb. And so I've got one in front of me right over here, right? So the socket has all the electronics embedded in it, as well as the muscle sensors embedded on the inside. So what the user will do is they'll take their residual limb and they'll like slide it in the socket, kind of like it fits like a cast. Like, so if you broke your arm and you get a cast around it, it's kind of like that. And then what you'll do is you attach our hand to the end of that, and then they'll be able to walk around and control the hand just by using their muscles. And what we're doing with the military is we're taking that one step further, or many steps further. And instead of having this cast, the socket that's made that goes around your residual limb, we're actually doing a titanium implant that can go directly into your bones and then come outside of your body. And then you attach the hand directly to your bones like a natural limb should be attached. And it makes a huge difference for our patients that, you know, you're like, imagine like wearing a shoe over your arm. That could get uncomfortable over time. You start to sweat, things shift around. That's kind of what like a socket is, right? Whereas,
that's a good point.
It's much lighter. It's like loaded the right way, and then like you don't have all these issues with like friction and things like that, right? And so one step further than that, instead of having the muscle sensors on the outside of your skin, we're actually implanting them inside your body, and we're directing the wires through that titanium implant, so that instead of having these like pre-programmed grips that I'm controlling here, so like this is like a power grip, or if I'm doing like a different grip, for example, like a key grip like this, you can actually control your individual fingers, and that's we're hoping that by next year that we'll have our first patients playing piano or typing on a keyboard again.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I never thought of it like that, but you're absolutely right. Like, I guess, like, for those who are using artificial limbs right now, like, if you just have it on the end of your limb, it gets uncomfortable and sweaty and everything. And I would imagine that would pose some issues in like some third world countries where, you know, it's like more humid and tropical. Would there be issues with the sensors at that point too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you sweat a lot and things are shifting around, then that really messes with the signals that you're getting in particular. And so if we can make that all go invasive, then that's you get a better signal quality, but it's also more consistent over longer periods of time too. And I wanted to show you this too, because this is a fun little demonstration that we can do. So where you're at right now, we can actually have you control the hand, and this will give you a glimpse of what we plan on doing with the nerve implants in particular. And so I just put it on this socket, and the only difference between this one and the other one was that this has a USB cable that's connected to it, and I can actually plug this into my phone. And so if you put your hand in front of the camera.
For those who are listening, I mean, if you're on Spotify or YouTube, you'll be able to see this. If you're on Apple, I'm sorry, Apple doesn't allow videos, so you're gonna have to go look at it at the other platforms. Okay, so I got my hand in front of the camera.
Yeah. And then go ahead and bend your fingers.
All right, I'm bending my thumb. It's bending the thumb. All right, I'm gonna do an OK sign. It did an OK sign perfectly. I'm waving my fingers, and it's doing exactly that. That's amazing. So literally, Aadeel has his phone up to his screen, and I have my hand up to my camera, and I'm literally controlling this bionic hand. That's amazing.
Imagine that if you were on Earth, which we are, but the hand was up in space, then that's one way you could control it and then eventually feel from it as well.
Are you able to share? I mean, which are you able to share the robotic companies you guys are talking to right now?
So I can share NASA and Facebook, and Aptronic is another one that's been using our hand.
Okay, but you can't share anybody else. Okay, got it. So let's talk money, right? So right now, with your current crowdfund, you've raised about $1.5 million. What do you need? What do you need, and when are you guys looking to close your round?
Yeah. And so honestly, the more we raise, the faster we can go, right? And we've got plans of making like a bionic leg that you can do a triathlon in. And so that's like a 5-year goal of ours, and we kind of want to get to that point as well as scaling it and manufacturing. And so I think this round we're probably going to cap out at 5 million, and we've got some grants coming in as well. So it's through like NSF, and we applied for a NASA one as well, and some DoD funding as well. And so once we get all of those funds, then the plan is to hit the ground running on some of this crazy R&D stuff, as well as scaling up the manufacturing.
Got it. And manufacturing right now is overseas, correct?
No, actually, we do it all in house. So if you're
that's great. So you really are made in the USA.
That's right. And it's like a robotics paradise in our lab. So yeah, like I said, if you ever come down here,
I need to make it down there because I'm in the San Diego area, so I need to come down and visit you. Tell us a little bit more about the size of the market. And for me, just for context, like people know that I hate asking this question because like there's the size of the market, but there's the size of the category that you can design, which probably has a small market today. The electric car market was like nothing 15 years ago, right? But tell us a little bit more about the market for the investors who are listening or thinking about joining crowdfunding. What's the potential here?
Yeah, and so for example, if we're just looking at the prosthetics and orthotics market, then it's about a $20 billion market worldwide. And the bionic limb segment of that is about $2 billion. And that's growing at a rate of like 9 point something percent. So it's increasing pretty quickly. And then on the same note, if we look at the robotic like end effector market, so right now it's only at about like 6 billion, but it's growing at a rate of like 12 to 15%. So that segment is like growing really, really quickly. And so that's why I was saying too that depending on how fast like the humanoid robots are going to be scaling and things like that it could potentially even overtake like the clinical side of things as well, and even subsidize it.
Interesting. Something, by the way, and I'm kind of jumping around here, but just something I forgot to bring up. Talk about the hand itself, like because it's made out of, I believe, carbon fiber.
Yep. So the fingers, they're made out of like silicone, and there's a 3D printed bone inside of it that's made out of like nylon and rubber, essentially, and that's what allows it to be flexible and super impact resistant. The palms themselves are made out of actual carbon fiber. That's what makes the hand super light, super strong. And then there's 6 different motors that are in here. So there's flexion, extension, all 5 of the motors. All 5 of the fingers, and then thumb rotation as well. So we can just rotate the thumb as well on there too.
Got it. So once you guys raise the money, aside from like R&D, like when are you guys commercial currently?
Yep. Yeah. So we are FDA registered. We're covered by Medicare. We've got over 100 users using the hand all across the US already, and researchers all around the world.
Oh, wow. So you guys are covered by Medicare. That's great. What about have you worked with private insurers yet? Private?
And typically what we found is that in most cases, if Medicare covers it, they're the gold standard. So all of the other, like the private insurers follow suit. And to put things in context, right? Before prosthetics, especially the ones that were what we call multi-articulated hands, where you could move individual fingers, only about 10% of patients could afford it. And that's if you were either in the military or if you had a workplace accident.
Right.
And by getting it covered under Medicare, we've expanded that access to now 75% of patients can afford the most advanced thing that can on the market.
That's fantastic. And there was a kid I went to school with a long time ago when I was in middle school, and he was born without any hands, and technically, I guess from his calf down. So he had prosthetic legs, but he was very, very resourceful and found ways to do just fine. But at least the technology wasn't good enough. And then, who knows, like probably back then, a Bionic hand probably cost a lot. It still costs a lot. So let's get to the cost. Before Psyonic existed, what did a Bionic hand cost? And then what does your Bionic hand cost?
Yeah, so typically, like the advanced Bionic hands can be between like $26,000 to $32,000 to a clinician, and then the clinician will they're doing like their work too, so they're building the socket and like getting all these other components and things like that, and to recoup all of their costs and everything, they're usually trying to double their margins, right? And so they'll try and bill insurance like $50,000 to $60,000 on one of those hands. Medicare only pays $31,000 specific for that specific code that covers the hand itself. And so a lot of times that's why it gets denied, right? Because you have a $50,000, $60,000 like reimbursement bill on something that they'll only pay $31,000 for, right? And that's why usually only the VA or workers' comp were the two insurers that would really cover that. And so our hand is priced at $15,500 to the clinician. And then they get reimbursed $31,000 for it from Medicare. And again, if Medicare pays for it, then all the other insurers follow suit. And then Medicare pays less for our hand than the other hands, as well as the other insurers. And then the patient just pays whatever their copay is. So it's a win for everyone in the value chain.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Now, just to kind of wrap things up on the investment side, and again, it's a great story. And again, I encourage people to go check out the website. So www.psyonic.io/invest. So we'll do a little bit of rapid fire questions here. So your minimum investment size, what is it?
$250.
Okay, very good. So pretty affordable for a lot of people, especially for my audience. What kind of shares are you issuing?
Yeah, so these are it's direct equity into the company, and so these are I think like Class B non-voting shares or something like that.
Okay, got it. Now, it's very clear as to the different value points and everything, but like in one sentence, if you had to tell somebody like why they would invest, what's the number one reason you'd give them to invest in Psyonic?
Yeah, so basically, you're investing in the future of bionic technologies, and this is something that's going to affect not just patients missing limbs, but basically every human consumer that's going to be interacting with humanoid robots eventually. And honestly, with these nerve implants things, there's a definite consumer market for that in the future too. So we've got some of those plans bubbling up as well. So in one way or another, the technologies that we're developing are going to affect everyone.
Got it. And by the way, just on that same token, I don't know how I missed this. Do you guys have any patents? And if so, how many?
Yeah, so we've got 4 patents on the hand currently. And so the first one is on our flexible finger design. The second one is on our motor control technology that makes it faster than any other bionic hand. The third one is for how we do our molding processes that enables the sensory feedback, the touch feedback in particular. And the fourth one is on a surgery that we're developing to suture an artificial tendon onto your residual tendons for a partial finger or partial hand design. So lots of cool stuff that's coming out.
That's amazing. Why do you think a larger company has not done something like this? Like you got, I think it's Hokuma. There's a lot of like big bionic companies. Exo's another example of another big one. But why hasn't the larger company done this yet?
Yeah, and so the thing is that we don't use traditional manufacturing processes, right? We've invented a lot of the techniques to manufacture the hand in particular, and that's why we.
Interesting. So you have technically some IP in your manufacturing processes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that patentable? Can you patent that technically?
I think they're more so trade secrets. As
there we go.
Yeah. And because of that, it's software, like I was mentioning earlier, software robotics was like an up and coming field, and there's not really traditional manufacturing methods like mass injection molding that you do with plastics necessarily for some of the things that we're developing in the hand with like overmolds for 3D printed components and things like that using 3D printed molds. And so because of that, because we're doing it all in house, that makes it a lot harder for the bigger companies to kind of replicate this. And let's say that it took them 2 years to replicate exactly what we're doing. 2 years from now, our hand is going to be like 1,000,000 times better than what it is already. Just in the same way that our hand already is 1,000,000 times better than it was 2 years ago. especially when we're talking about like the nerve integration, the bone integration, the level of dexterity that we plan to achieve. So we're much more nimble in that sense, can get a lot more done in a quicker time.
Got it. And then the last thing I was going to ask is that, most people, they want to know like your pathway. So if they make an investment, in your company through this crowdfund, then the obvious question is like, how do I get my money? How do I get a return? Like, what does that look like? And what, who knows what the market's going to look like? Who knows what's going to happen? Whether it's a strategic acquisition or anything else, but just your best guess on that. So yeah, how do people make money off of this?
Yeah, in 3 to 5 years, we can see an IPO happening on this. We plan on rapidly expanding it and getting our sales like way up so that we can make that happen. It'll be an exciting time.
And right now, when you sell, is it just all online, or do you have a sales force?
So actually, half of our sales come from social media, which for a
that's great. Device, I love it.
Not typical.
I love that.
And it's because, like, we were mentioning, like, I've arm wrestled against the para-triathlete national champion, and I've lost. We've done flaming board breaking with the hand. I've climbed to the roof of my house, dropped it 30 feet in the air and survived, put it in a dryer for 10 minutes, stepped on it. We did bottle flip tricks, if you remember that trend.
Yeah.
Bionic hand. And then potential users and robotics researchers see these videos, and they're like, how can I get one of these hands? And then if you're a patient, then we're like, well, we'll work with one of your clinicians, or if they don't have a clinician, we'll put them in contact with one in their area and then go through their insurance. And if they're a robotics researcher, then we go directly to them. So it's worked out really well. So on that front. And I was mentioning that our biggest issue is we've got more demand than we can produce. So we haven't had a huge sales force.
That's fantastic. What in terms of attribution, which channel has brought you the most like revenue? Is it Instagram?
So it's actually primarily Facebook and LinkedIn, and then followed by Instagram. So
interesting.
Yeah.
What's your next viral video you guys are gonna make? Do you have any ideas?
I will give you a little bit of a hint, but without divulging too much. But we just recently got a robot dog, so you might be.
Oh yeah, I saw you posted something about it earlier, so that is pretty awesome. But you guys are in San Diego. I'm pretty sure that there's like if you go to certain areas, like I think there are great white sharks here, aren't there?
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. You can get the arm eaten by a great white shark, maybe. That'd be pretty cool.
Recreate some Jaws type action. Man.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, that's one thing I gotta tell you, Aadeel, is just because like we've known each other for a few years, and it's funny because like and I gotta find it and text it to you, but I came across our photo when we first met and Zoomed back in like 2020, and so just following along and seeing you guys gain so much traction, and I saw you guys on 60 Minutes. This just seems like the public and the market has really embraced the Psyonic story, and it's really exciting to see what you guys are doing, especially considering that there's so many people out there. It's one of those life-changing things, I think, when you are given like a bionic hand, right? I think I put it up there with like somebody who can't hear, can't see, like it changes somebody's life, right? And so I think that's really exciting. But then the other side, from an investment standpoint, like I think it's really interesting that there's the healthcare component, but then you go outside of that into robotics, into space, and then, without getting too much into it, you mentioned like nerve implantation, right? And so, that's becoming a very big thing for a lot of industries. I think Elon Musk has definitely made that a lot more popular with Neuralink, right? Then you have all these other companies like Synchron, Intercosmos, and everything coming out. And so I think it's super exciting. So with that being said, before we kind of wrap things up, any last words to our audience?
This is going to be a really exciting future, and I would love to everyone be part of our bionic revolution.
Oh, couldn't think of a better way to end, man. So that being said, I want to remind our listeners, go to www.psyonic.io, Psyonic spelled PSYONIC.io/invest. They have a great investment page. You can see a lot of details, including how much they've raised, their valuation, a lot of videos, a lot of details in the technology, anything and everything that you need to make an investment in the company. So be sure to do that. And again, you guys are going to keep the crowdfund open for another month or two, I believe, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Aadeel, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's been a blast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening. That's another episode of the State of MedTech. Be sure to go out and check Adeel's company, and be sure to give them a follow on social media. They got fantastic videos, definitely much better med device videos than what you're used to seeing. So that being said, we'll see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.